Beloved film lovers, before the world laughed, before the world cried, and before millions believed they understood the heart of Forrest Gump, there were strange secrets, hidden struggles, and unsettling moments behind the camera that almost changed the story forever. What audiences saw in 1994 felt magical, innocent, and unforgettable. But behind that gentle smile and those famous words was a production filled with odd decisions, emotional breakdowns, near disasters, and truths that very few people ever talk about. When Forrest Gump first appeared on screens in 1994, audiences thought they were watching a simple story about kindness and destiny. A man with a pure heart moving through history like a quiet witness. But the truth behind the making of the film is far stranger than the movie itself. Strange choices were made. Actors nearly walked away. Scenes that changed cinema were filmed under unexpected circumstances. And some of the most emotional moments were born out of real pain behind the scenes. At the center of it all stood the quiet intensity of Tom Hanks, a man who had already proven himself as one of Hollywood's most respected performers. But even he didn't fully understand the emotional weight of the role when he first agreed to play Forrest. In fact, very few people believed the movie would work at all. Hollywood executives were confused by the script. Some thought it was too strange. Others believed audiences would never connect with such an unusual character. A man who ran across America, met presidents, inspired cultural moments, and somehow remained completely innocent in the middle of it all. It sounded ridiculous on paper. And even the director, Robert Zemeckis, later admitted that there were moments during production when he quietly wondered if the entire project might collapse. But perhaps the strangest truth of all is how the story even became a movie in the first place. The film was based on a novel written by Winston Groom, yet the book itself was far stranger than the film audiences eventually saw. In Groom's version of Forrest, the character wasn't just a sweet and simple man drifting through history. He was larger, rougher, more chaotic. At one point in the book, Forrest even travels into space with a chimpanzee. Yes, a chimpanzee. It sounds almost unbelievable now, but early versions of the screenplay actually considered including some of those bizarre elements. Imagine that for a moment. The emotional story we know today nearly turned into something far more surreal. The script passed through multiple rewrites before it reached the hands of screenwriter Eric Roth. Roth saw something in the story that others had missed. He realized Forrest's innocence wasn't the joke of the story, it was the heart of it. So he stripped away many of the stranger elements and focused on something deeper, a quiet soul witnessing America change around him. But even then, nobody knew if audiences would accept it. When the casting process began, several big Hollywood names were quietly approached. Some read the script and didn't understand it. Others worried the character might be offensive or misunderstood. Playing a man with Forrest's unique personality was a huge risk in Hollywood at the time. Eventually, the script reached Tom Hanks. And something unexpected happened. Hanks didn't laugh at the character. He didn't see him as strange or comedic. Instead, he saw something heartbreakingly human. In interviews years later, Hanks would reveal that he believed Forrest represented a kind of goodness the world rarely celebrates anymore. But accepting the role came with serious concerns. At the time, Hanks was already a major star, but he knew this performance would require something different from anything he had done before. Forrest spoke slowly, he moved differently. His innocence could easily be misunderstood if performed incorrectly. And that's when one of the strangest facts about the film quietly shaped the entire performance. The voice. That unforgettable Southern accent, the gentle way Forrest speaks, the rhythm that millions of viewers can instantly recognize today, was not originally how Tom Hanks planned to play the character. During early rehearsals, Hanks struggled to find the right tone. Nothing felt natural. Nothing felt honest. Then something completely unexpected happened during filming in Alabama. Tom Hanks met the young actor playing Forrest as a child, Michael Connor Humphreys. The boy spoke with a natural, relaxed Alabama accent, soft, unforced, authentic. Hanks listened carefully. And in that moment, something clicked. Instead of the child imitating the adult version of Forrest, Tom Hanks decided to imitate the child. It was an unusual decision, and some people on set were skeptical, but the result created one of the most iconic character voices in film history. Life is like a box of chocolates. Those words, spoken in that calm and gentle voice, would eventually echo across the entire world. But behind that famous line was another secret that many fans never realized. The line itself almost never existed. In early drafts of the script, the dialogue was completely different. The famous chocolate quote was added later during rewrites, and even then nobody expected it to become legendary. What makes the story even stranger is that the line was delivered during a scene that felt emotionally fragile behind the scenes. Filming the bus stop sequences required long hours of repetition under the hot southern sun. Crew members remember the atmosphere being oddly quiet during those days, almost reflective. Tom Hanks would sit on the bench between takes, still dressed as Forrest, sometimes staring out into the distance as if he were still inside the character's mind. Some crew members later described those moments as strangely emotional, as if Forrest himself had temporarily stepped into the real world. But the emotional weight of the film didn't stop with Hanks. Another powerful presence shaped the movie's heart. Jenny. The complicated, tragic woman Forrest loves his entire life was played by Robin Wright, and her performance would quietly become one of the most painful elements of the story. Jenny's life in the film is filled with trauma, abuse, addiction, and regret. But what many people don't know is that filming some of those scenes left Robin Wright emotionally drained. Certain moments, particularly the darker sequences showing Jenny's struggles, were so heavy that the set would fall silent after filming ended. Crew members remember Wright sometimes needing a few minutes alone after particularly emotional takes. It wasn't just acting. It was immersion. And that emotional depth gave Forrest Gump something few films ever achieve. Beneath the humor and nostalgia, the story carried an undercurrent of sadness that slowly revealed itself over time. But while audiences were captivated by the film's heart, another strange secret was unfolding quietly in the background. A financial gamble. The studio making the movie, Paramount Pictures, wasn't completely confident the film would succeed. The special effects needed to place Forrest into historical footage were expensive for the time, and the unusual tone of the story worried executives. At one point, the budget became such a concern that Tom Hanks and Robert Zemeckis made a shocking decision. Instead of demanding more money, they agreed to give up part of their salaries. In exchange, they would receive a percentage of the film's profits if it succeeded. It was a risky move, but it revealed how strongly they believed in the story. And as history would later show, that decision would turn into one of the most profitable deals in Hollywood history. But the strangest moments during production were still yet to come. Because as filming continued, something eerie began happening during certain scenes. Moments where actors said they felt unexpected emotion. Scenes that seemed to take on a life of their own. And perhaps the most haunting example of this happened during a quiet scene that almost didn't make the final cut. A scene connected to a real historical tragedy. A moment that made several people on set stop speaking entirely. And the truth about that moment is something very few viewers have ever heard. Legendary stories often carry a strange energy with them, the kind of quiet intensity that people on set can feel but never quite explain. As filming continued on Forrest Gump, the cast and crew began noticing something unusual about certain scenes. Some moments felt heavier than expected, not technically difficult, not even visually complex, but emotionally overwhelming in ways that caught everyone off guard. One of those moments happened during a scene that now feels completely natural to audiences. Forrest sitting calmly while describing moments of American history, events that shaped an entire generation. Wars, protests, tragedies, and victories that millions of people still remember vividly. The film was about one man drifting through history, but the weight of those real events was something the actors could not ignore. During the sequence involving the Vietnam War, the set atmosphere reportedly changed dramatically. What appeared on screen as a chaotic battlefield was actually filmed in the quiet marshlands of South Carolina. But once the cameras rolled, something about the intensity of the performances made the scenes feel disturbingly real. At the center of those sequences was the unforgettable character Lieutenant Dan, played by Gary Sinise. Sinise approached the role with a seriousness that stunned the crew. Lieutenant Dan was not meant to be just another war character. He was bitter, angry, wounded both physically and emotionally, a man who believed his destiny had been stolen from him. But the strange truth about Gary Sinise's performance is that he carried personal emotions into the role that very few people knew about at the time. Sinise had deep respect for American veterans, and portraying Lieutenant Dan became far more personal than he originally expected. Some scenes, particularly the hospital sequences after Dan loses his legs, were filmed with such raw intensity that the entire set reportedly fell silent after each take. No one joked, no one moved. There were moments when the camera stopped rolling and the emotional weight still lingered in the air. What made those scenes even more remarkable was the groundbreaking visual effect used to remove Lieutenant Dan's legs. In 1994, digital effects were nowhere near what they are today. Yet the filmmakers somehow created the illusion that Gary Sinise had lost both legs below the knee. The secret behind it was both simple and incredibly clever. During filming, Sinise actually wore bright blue fabric around his lower legs. Those areas were then digitally erased later, allowing the illusion to appear seamless on screen. It was an incredibly ambitious effect for its time, and many visual effects artists quietly admitted that if it failed, the entire emotional impact of the character could collapse. But it didn't fail. Instead, Lieutenant Dan became one of the most powerful characters in the film. His bitterness, his anger at fate, and his eventual emotional redemption became one of the most moving arcs in the entire story. Yet even Gary Sinise later admitted that filming certain scenes was unexpectedly emotional. One moment in particular left a lasting impression. The scene where Lieutenant Dan F. in Ollie thanks Forrest for saving his life during the war. It was meant to be a quiet moment, just two friends talking on a shrimp boat under the night sky, but when the cameras rolled, something deeper happened. Tom Hanks stayed completely in character, his soft voice, his innocent sincerity, the simple way Forrest listened without judgment. Gary Sinise later described feeling a sudden rush of emotion during the scene that he hadn't fully anticipated. The gratitude in Lieutenant Dan's voice wasn't just acting anymore. It felt real. And when the scene ended, there was reportedly a long pause on set before anyone spoke. Moments like that began happening more frequently as production moved forward. But perhaps the most bizarre technical challenge of the entire film came from something audiences barely even think about today. The famous running scenes. Forrest running across America is one of the most recognizable sequences in film history. Millions of viewers remember watching him run through deserts, mountains, highways, and endless landscapes. But what most people don't realize is that those scenes were incredibly difficult to film. Tom Hanks had to run for days in different locations across the United States, sometimes repeating the same simple motion over and over again so the editors could combine the shots later. There was no digital trick to make him look like he was running for months. He actually had to run. And in one strange moment during production, Hanks reportedly injured himself slightly while filming one of those sequences. It wasn't a major injury, but it forced a brief pause in filming. The strange part is how the injury even happened. The scene required Forrest to run across a long stretch of road while the camera followed from a moving vehicle. The pacing had to be perfect. The timing had to match. But after multiple takes under the hot sun, fatigue began to set in. At one point, Hanks misjudged the timing while stopping, twisting awkwardly as the scene ended. It was a small accident, but it reminded the entire crew that even the simplest moments in the film demanded real physical effort. Still, none of those challenges compared to the strange technological experiment happening quietly behind the scenes. One of the most groundbreaking elements of Forrest Gump was the way Forrest interacts with real historical figures. When audiences first saw Forrest shaking hands with President John F. Kennedy or speaking to President Lyndon Johnson, Many assumed the scenes were simply clever editing tricks. But the truth was far more complicated. The visual effects team spent months manipulating archival footage from real historical broadcasts. They carefully altered the footage frame by frame, blending Tom Hanks into moments that had originally happened decades earlier. It was painstaking work. But what made it even stranger was the emotional reaction some crew members felt while watching the results. For the first time, history and fiction seemed to merge in a completely new way. Forrest wasn't just near history anymore, he appeared inside it. Some editors later described feeling chills the first time they saw the completed footage of Forrest speaking with President Kennedy. It looked so real that it felt almost unsettling. But the deeper emotional heart of the film still belonged to one relationship: Forrest and Jenny. Their story is one of the most tragic love stories ever portrayed in a mainstream Hollywood film. Forrest loves Jenny with pure devotion from childhood to adulthood, yet their lives constantly move in different directions. And behind the scenes, certain Jenny scenes became emotionally exhausting for everyone involved. One moment in particular stood out: the scene where Jenny, overwhelmed by her own pain and regret, nearly jumps from a balcony. It was filmed late at night under dark lighting designed to capture the emotional weight of the moment. Robin Wright reportedly delivered the scene with such raw intensity that some crew members had tears in their eyes by the time the take ended,